Entering the final phase of victory over Hitler's Nazis, Yank armies swarm across western Germany, bringing devastation to cities of the Reich. From all sides, Allied might crushes in on the remains of the Wehrmacht, bringing home the horrors of war to the German people.
By April 1945, the Allies were closing in on Germany from both the east and west, with the Soviet Red Army encircling Berlin and subjecting it to relentless bombardment and street fighting. Adolf Hitler, along with his inner circle, retreated to the Führerbunker, a fortified underground complex beneath the Reich Chancellery, which became the nerve center for the dwindling Nazi command facing imminent defeat. The atmosphere within the bunker was one of desperation and delusion, with high-ranking officials oscillating between moments of hopelessness and fanatic resolve. In the waning days of April 1945, as Hitler found himself holed up in this labyrinthine bunker, surrounded by the relentless onslaught of Allied forces and betrayed by collapsing military defenses. His final days were a harrowing blend of delusion, despair, and desperate defiance. This period marked the dramatic culmination of World War II in Europe, with Hitler grappling with the bitter realization of his regime's inevitable collapse and the catastrophic consequences of his leadership. Let's embark on the journey of Adolf Hitler's final days, exploring each moment as the downfall of Nazi Germany reached its climax. Hitler's 56th birthday was a grim affair, contrasting sharply with the grand celebrations of previous years. High-ranking Nazi officials, including Heinrich Himmler and Hermann Goring, attended what would be their last meeting with Hitler. Despite the dire situation, Hitler remained in a state of denial, believing that some miracle would turn the tide in Germany's favor. The Führerbunker was filled with tension as everyone present understood the hopelessness of their situation. The bombing of Berlin continued unabated, serving as a constant reminder of their impending doom. Hitler's physical and mental health had significantly deteriorated, with visible signs of Parkinson's disease exacerbating his erratic behavior and outbursts. The day ended with Hitler's insistence on staying in Berlin, further isolating himself from reality. On April 21st, Hitler was informed that the Soviet army had broken through the German defenses and was advancing into Berlin. During a heated military conference, Hitler lashed out at his generals, accusing them of betrayal and cowardice. For the first time, he admitted that the war was lost, but declared his intention to remain in Berlin and die there. The bunker atmosphere grew increasingly tense, as the realization of imminent defeat set in among the occupants. General Gotthard Heinrici, in charge of the defense of Berlin, attempted to implement a more strategic withdrawal, but his efforts were undermined by Hitler's irrational orders. Hitler's erratic decision-making became more apparent as he clung to delusional plans for non-existent armies to launch counterattacks. The psychological strain on those in the bunker was immense, with many beginning to plan their own escapes or resigning themselves to their fates. On April 22, 1945, Adolf Hitler had his final interaction with a group of young members from the Hitler Youth, who had been brought to the Führerbunker. These children, some as young as 12, had been fighting desperately to defend Berlin from the advancing Soviet forces. Hitler, increasingly isolated and delusional, took this opportunity to express his appreciation and admiration for their unwavering loyalty and courage. He praised them as the future of Germany, a stark contrast to the dire reality that the Nazi regime was facing complete collapse. Hermann Goring, stationed in Berchtesgaden, sent a telegram to Hitler suggesting that he should assume leadership of the Reich if Hitler was incapacitated. Goring's telegram, intended to ensure continuity of command, was interpreted by Hitler as an act of treason. Enraged, Hitler ordered Goring's arrest and stripped him of all his titles and offices. This event highlighted the increasing paranoia and mistrust within the Nazi leadership. The incident further isolated Hitler, who now viewed even his closest associates with suspicion. This mistrust extended to other high-ranking officials, creating a climate of fear and betrayal within the bunker. The fallout from Goring's perceived treachery deepened the sense of doom among the remaining loyalists, who realized that their positions and lives were precariously hanging by a thread. Hitler and his remaining loyalists, including Joseph Goebbels and Martin Bormann, held continuous meetings to discuss the defense of Berlin. General Helmuth Weidling was appointed to command the city's defenses, despite the hopeless military situation. The discussions were marked by increasingly desperate plans and a lack of viable options. Hitler continued to issue orders for counterattacks by non-existent or severely depleted units, illustrating his detachment from reality. The physical conditions in the bunker deteriorated, with shortages of food and medical supplies exacerbating the dire situation. Hitler's health continued to decline, and he became more isolated, spending long hours alone or with only a few close confidants. Goebbels remained fiercely loyal, issuing propaganda messages urging Berliners to fight to the last man. The strategic discussions highlighted the chaos and futility of the Nazi leadership's attempts to stave off defeat. By April 26, Soviet forces had fully encircled Berlin, cutting off all potential routes for retreat or reinforcement. The Red Army had penetrated deep into the city, facing fierce but ultimately futile resistance from the remaining German defenders, including members of the Volkssturm, the German National Militia, and the Hitler Youth. The encirclement of Berlin symbolized the imminent fall of the city and the Nazi regime. Inside the bunker, the realization of the encirclement heightened the sense of urgency and desperation. Hitler continued to issue unrealistic orders for counterattacks and the relief of Berlin by non-existent armies, demonstrating his complete detachment from the military reality on the ground. The morale of both the civilian population and the remaining military forces plummeted as they recognized the inevitability of defeat and the severe consequences that would follow. Communication with the outside world became increasingly sporadic as Soviet forces targeted and destroyed key infrastructure. The bunker's occupants relied on intermittent radio broadcasts and reports from couriers, but the flow of reliable information was severely disrupted. Hitler's aides and generals, including Wilhelm Keitel and Alfred Jodl, were isolated from the broader command structure, complicating any efforts at coordinated defense or negotiation. The breakdown in communication further isolated Hitler, exacerbating his paranoia and delusional belief in last-minute salvation. Reports from various fronts indicated that the Allies were advancing rapidly across all sectors, and the possibility of any effective German resistance was rapidly diminishing. The atmosphere in the bunker grew increasingly tense, with arguments and accusations becoming more frequent as the situation deteriorated. News of Benito Mussolini's capture and execution by Italian partisans reached the Führerbunker, profoundly impacting Hitler and his entourage. Mussolini, the fascist dictator of Italy and Hitler's close ally, was executed on April 28, 1945, and his body was publicly displayed and desecrated in Milan. This event served as a stark reminder of the fate that could await Hitler and his top officials if they were captured. Hitler became more resolute in his decision to avoid capture at all costs, reaffirming his plan to commit suicide rather than face a similar fate. The news of Mussolini's death further demoralized the bunker's occupants, many of whom began to seriously consider their own options for escape or suicide. In the early hours of April 29, 1945, Adolf Hitler married Eva Braun in a brief, somber civil ceremony within the Führerbunker. This wedding, starkly different from typical Nazi extravagance, symbolized a desperate defiance as the Third Reich faced collapse. Shortly after, Hitler meticulously prepared for his impending death, ensuring the destruction of personal effects and distribution of poisoned capsules among loyalists. He dictated his political testament and personal will, blaming Jews and his generals for Germany's defeat while appointing Admiral Karl Donitz as his symbolic successor. Eva Braun remained composed, hosting a small tea party amidst the grim preparations. As Soviet troops closed in on the Reich Chancellery, Hitler and Eva Braun retreated to their private quarters in the bunker. Around 3:30 p.m., Hitler shot himself in the temple while Braun took cyanide. Their bodies were discovered by bunker staff, including Hitler's valet Heinz Linge and SS officer Otto Gunsch. Following Hitler's explicit instructions, their bodies were carried to the garden above, doused with petrol, and set on fire to prevent them from being captured and displayed by the Soviets. The suicides marked the definitive end of Hitler's reign and symbolized the total collapse of the Nazi regime. The immediate aftermath in the bunker was chaotic, with those remaining scrambling to decide their next steps. Some, like Joseph Goebbels, chose to remain loyal to the end, while others sought to escape or surrender. The news of Hitler's death spread quickly through the bunker, bringing a mix of relief, despair, and a grim sense of closure. The Soviet forces soon learned of the event, marking a pivotal moment in the final days of the war in Europe. Following Hitler's death, Joseph Goebbels and his wife Magda made the tragic decision to end their lives along with their 6 children. Magda Goebbels, a fervent believer in the Nazi cause, could not envision a life for her children in a world without National Socialism. The children were sedated and poisoned, a chilling act that underscored the fanatical loyalty of the Goebbels family to Hitler and his ideology. Later that day, Joseph and Magda Goebbels committed suicide in the garden of the Reich Chancellery. This act was both a personal and political statement, symbolizing the complete dedication of the Goebbels to Hitler's cause even in the face of absolute defeat. The bunker's remaining occupants were left in shock, further contributing to the already pervasive sense of hopelessness and despair. With Hitler and Goebbels dead, the remaining Nazi leadership in the bunker was in disarray. General Helmuth Weidling, recognizing the futility of further resistance, took command of the situation. Understanding the catastrophic condition of Berlin and the overwhelming power of the Soviet forces, Weidling negotiated the surrender of the city. Early on May 2nd, he officially surrendered Berlin to Soviet General Vasily Chuikov. This marked the end of the Battle of Berlin, a brutal and destructive conflict that had reduced the city to ruins. The surrender also signaled the collapse of organized German resistance in the capital. Soviet troops began to take control of the remaining pockets of resistance and secure key locations. The fall of Berlin was a significant milestone, essentially marking the end of Nazi Germany. The surviving bunker occupants, including secretaries and lower-ranking officials, either attempted to escape or surrendered to advancing Soviet forces, facing capture and interrogation in the aftermath of Germany's unconditional surrender, which would officially occur just days later. As we conclude this journey through Adolf Hitler's final days and the fall of Berlin, we witness the harrowing end of Nazi Germany and the sobering aftermath of World War II. The surrender of Berlin on May 2, 1945, marked not only the collapse of organized German resistance but also the definitive conclusion of Hitler's catastrophic reign. The once mighty Third Reich lay in ruins, its leaders either dead or captured, its cities devastated by war. The lessons of this dark chapter in history remind us of the dangers of totalitarianism and the importance of vigilance in safeguarding freedom and democracy. Reflecting on these events reminds us of the resilience of humanity in the face of tyranny and the enduring pursuit of justice and peace.